Ah yes, the debate that is as old as time itself. Are you good at the game now, or is the game too easy? I feel like Monster Hunter Wilds kind of mixes these things perfectly together because it feels off. Look, for players who've played previous Monster Hunter games, it feels a bit off, I'll be very honest, in the way that combat feels smooth, suspiciously smooth, I gotta say. Like there's some kind of training wheels on it, kind of smooth. Like Capcom, I gotta be honest, man, I see some things here that make it feel like an easier game. So this video is all about that. We're gonna objectively look at why the game might seem easier for veteran players or new players alike as well. But also, there's a flip side to the coin where you're just good at gaming now. I think the best way to look at how Wilds is now as a Monster Hunter game is to look at previous Monster Hunter games and how things were managed differently back in the day. So we gotta start off with health potions, man. Health potions back in the day, they weren't as abundant as they are in Wilds, of course, or World for that matter. But man, back in the olden Monster Hunter games, you couldn't move when you were pulling off a potion or using any amount of items. Look, nowadays you can run. If you're using sword and shield, you can have sword and shield out and use items as well. So back in the day, man, for the old heads out there, the people who've played previous Monster Hunter games, you know what I mean, man. You had to stop in your place like you're doing one of those Pepsi or Coca-Cola ads where you're kind of like Monster Hunter games back in the day, you couldn't move when you were using items. So when you were using potions, you had to pull off the full animation in the hopes that the monster doesn't start rushing at your goofy ass looking there like you're flexing your muscle for no apparent reason. Another example is carding. Back in the day, carding used to be a bit more punishing, in all honesty. Look, back in World even, if you would get carded once, you lose the meal buff and all kinds of buffs that you had previously. Back in World, if you die, you lose. You go back to the base health that you have. That's why max potion, the item, is super important to have with you, because if you get carded, you can just use that and buff up your health back to maximum. But now in Wilds, they've made it a bit easier, a bit more manageable. Buffs are based on a timer now, and the timer persists even if you get carded. So admittedly, that makes it a bit more manageable, a bit more easier in all honesty, because it's a free pass kind of. You get carded, you get a maximum of 3 cards, I think even 5 in some cases. If you get carded once, it doesn't matter. The penalty for getting carded isn't as big either. So it's kind of a get back into the action, as well as having pop-up camps which are closer to the action. You have your sacred that automatically gets you back into the action as fast as possible, and I just spit on the camera as well. They made quality of life improvements that make the fighting a lot easier. You're back into the action. You know what else helps you with carding in general? Is subscribing to the channel. Well, gone are the days where you have to stop in the middle of a hunt just to gather some items so you can craft some potions, because you might not have them. You also get free items now way more often. Your backpack gets filled up super often, like every 10 minutes or something. So that's become a lot easier. I gotta be honest with that. That kind of brings me to the second point of quality of life improvements, which is sharpening your weapon and stamina usage in general. Look, back in the day, stamina, the game hated you for using any amount of stamina. You were exhausted all the time, and you have to have items to buff up your stamina as soon as possible. But nowadays, it's way more forgiving. You don't have to constantly be careful with your stamina like you would in a Souls-like game in general. But in Monster Hunter back in the day, everything used up stamina, so you were exhausted all the time. I mean, I would be exhausted if I had a freaking armor and a big-ass shield and sword that I carry along with me while running and climbing a freaking monster. I'd be exhausted as well. Like, I'm exhausted running up a flight of stairs, just one flight of stairs. And I got nothing on me except for a jacket and shoes, man. I got pants also. Let me make that clear. But back in the day, stamina usage was way more punishing. And sharpening your weapon, man, don't even get me started on that. Nowadays, you can partially sharpen your weapon. In Wilds, you can partially sharpen your weapon. If you look at the thing while sharpening, you can cancel it mid-sharpening, and you can still get back into the action. You can kind of hop up every time you have. But back in the day, man, you had to really pull off the animation to get full sharpness. And the penalty for having a unsharpened weapon was way bigger. Your weapon used to ricochet a lot more off the monster. But now, man, it doesn't really matter. Look, I for one like that quality of life update of having a dull weapon, a piece of dull cutlery, and you can still do some damage. So that's a good thing overall. Another thing that I feel like is the elephant in the room, and that's monsters. And man, they tell their attacks a lot easier now. They're very choreographed, they're very dramatic. That can be put down to better animations and better graphics overall. But back in the day, I feel like the monsters, they were harder to read at times, and their special attacks as well. Nowadays, you get the health thing, the kind of health shockwave thing that tells you how damaged damaging an attack will be in wilds, of course. Back in the day, you couldn't tell. A monster might just breathe towards you and that might take half of your health, or they might hit the biggest freaking spin 360 move and headbutt you, and that might take a sliver off your health. So you had to really learn the kind of patterns, learn the attacks of the monsters, and do them multiple times. Now they kind of removed the idea of doing hunts multiple times until you get to the end game, farming of course. But now in wilds, I feel like they've made monster attacks more telling, if that makes any sense. You can easily read the monster's attacks, and kind of according to that, you can kind of, there's more iframes here where you can be dodging in between, because back in the day, pixels used to be as large as my head pretty much. So you weren't able to dodge attacks as easily as you are today. Now these changes overall aren't just minor changes. They're big changes in the grander scheme of things, where if you look at the experience as a whole, because there's so many quality of life improvements in the game, like the hunts themselves, you can use the environment a lot more now. It makes it objectively easier to manage, not necessarily an easier game, because of course, man, you might have hundreds if not thousands of hours of slaying Rathaloses. So of course, man, it's gonna be easier for you, and as well as you know all the attacks, you know how to pull off all the best attacks for every weapon, you know how to position yourself, you know where iframes work, you know when to use items, what items to use, what items to craft. Man, there's so many different skills and all of that stuff, perks and all of that that you can use early in the game that veteran players already know how to use. But for newcomers, it's a different ball game, man. They might have difficulties in getting through the game, even if it's more manageable. And look, overall, it's more fun. But I feel like the elephant in the room is not only the quality of life stuff, but you're just good at gaming now, broski. Like I said, man, you have muscle memory, not just from Monster Hunter games, but games in general. If you were coming from like a Souls-like game, an action-adventure game, or a fast-paced shooter or something, you have faster reactions than what you did back in the day when you were playing on a PSP or PS2 or something like that. Well, look, pixels are smaller now, so there's a lot more pixels on screen, so you being more precise with your movements is more possible now. Look, I'm throwing it back. Pause on that one. But I'm throwing it back to like old head gamers out there. For new gamers, you guys, man, your guys' attention span is this big. So of course you're gonna be very fast at everything you do, man. I'm kidding. I am kidding. But yeah, if you've played any amount of games before, look, if you're pretending like every game from the off should be as difficult as a Souls-like game, or a Kingdom Come Deliverance, for example, where you know nothing about the combat, of course those games are going to be difficult. Look, Monster Hunter games, you've played one of them, you've played all of them. I gotta be honest, man, the fun factor in these games, in Wilds, it's up there with the very best that Monster Hunter has to offer. The fun factor is definitely there. But is it easier? I mean, the short answer is yes, of course. But there's multiple reasons as to why it's easier. It's not only just a skill issue or the monsters having way less ways to kind of beat the hunter, if that makes any sense. But quality of life updates, they make for an overall easier to manage game, not necessarily an easier game. I'm not saying the game is easy. There are some challenges here if you're unaware of how the game works in itself, or the mechanics, or even positioning. Look, there are challenges here to be made. Tempered monsters, man, Gora Mangala, they are tough to beat, even for seasoned veterans, man. And you'd be lying if you said you weren't sweating at least once in your whole playthrough. I'm not saying it is as difficult as older Monster Hunter games, because there's different factors in that as well. But yeah, man, it's way more manageable. I think the big answer to the debate is not Wilds is easier, it's just we've just gotten better as a community of gamers. But in any case, what the f do I know, man? I'm just a random gamer on the internet telling you that I have fun with this game and feel like it's not maybe as easy as everyone makes it out to be because of the quality of life thing. So I want to hear your thoughts in the comments down below, broski. Let me know, is Monster Hunter easier? Is it not? Is everyone just being very good at the game, so they're really trying to put you down in trying to learn attack patterns and monster patterns and all of that? Admittedly, look, repeat hunts, they've made it pretty much redundant. It's easier to get the rarer items in the game. So overall, yes, they've made a lot of quality of life updates to the game and make it, like I said, easier to manage. And I'm saying that so many times and my throat is drying out, in all honesty. But yeah, man, if you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. If you've made it this far into the video, man, you might as well. We're practically brothers right now. So you've watched this whole video, so man, subscribe to the channel. Let's get on with this together. In any case, I don't really know how to end the video, so enjoy the meme in the outro. I've been your broski. Keep on trucking, my dudes. I'll catch you in the next upload. Peace.